Hiking's supposed to be peaceful, right? Just you, the trail, and nature. But sometimes nature gets a little too quiet. Strange sounds in the woods, figures in the distance, and that feeling like someone or something is following you. These scary hiking stories might make you think twice before your next solo trek. My father and I were hunting at our cabin in Pennsylvania like we did for years, but something happened this last time that made us think about selling it. So when you go hunting, it is normal to get up super early in the morning, like before the sun is even up, which we did like we have every other time. Get up, get ready, make some coffee to drink, and also to fill up our thermoses we take along. After that, we packed our backpacks, grabbed our rifles, and out the door we went. Once we were outside, we put on our headlamps, switched the light to red so we wouldn't spook any animals, and off to the woods we went to find our tree stands. We have our tree stands about 100 yards away from each other so we can still communicate in case of an emergency. But it was when we were walking the roughly mile hike from our cabin to our tree stands that something really scared us. We were about a quarter mile in and I heard what sounded like an animal. Not just any animal, a very large animal. So we stopped and took a second to see if we could tell what it might be. There are all kinds of animals out here, like fox, deer, squirrels, and even black bears. We were more concerned about stumbling upon a black bear and possibly her cubs, but what we saw made us wish it was just that. From what we could tell, whatever this thing was staring back at us, and it was about 100 to 150 yards in front of us and off the trail to the right. We stood still and silent so we could get a better look, and what we saw shocked us. It was a man that looked to be around 6'5", only had shorts on, no shirt, no shoes, just shorts. I have to mention that this was in the beginning of December, and the temperature was only around 30 degrees. Then after a few seconds, he darted into the woods, and we reluctantly moved forward down the trail to where he was at. But we never saw or even heard him run away, almost like he wasn't there to begin with. I don't know what my father and I saw that morning, whatever it was, if it was a local or what, but there isn't any other cabins anywhere near ours that wouldn't require a significant hike, and the fact that he was dressed completely wrong for the weather is a bit strange. Now every time we leave in the morning to hunt, we will for sure be looking over our shoulders. I've always loved hiking alone. There's something calming and connecting to nature being deep in the woods with just your own footsteps and thoughts. This day, I was hiking a trail near the Glacier National Park. It wasn't super remote, it was just in the fall and not a lot of people venture out that way. The air was crisp, the leaves were changing color and looked so beautiful. I was about 5 miles in, moving at an average pace when I noticed everything had gone silent. If you have ever hiked deep in the woods, you know that you hear all kinds of rustling from squirrels and the noise of birds. And when it goes totally silent, you know something is wrong. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but the silence was thick, like the whole forest just stopped. This is when I got the feeling of something watching me, but I just brushed it off, kept walking, and then a few minutes later, I caught a glimpse of movement to my left. I then stopped and scanned the trees, but didn't see anything, so I kept going. After walking for another minute or so, I heard the faint crack of a twig, not super close, but not far away either. I turned around slowly, my heart racing, but still nothing. But now I was hyper aware, and with every step I took, I felt I could hear something behind me. I started to realize that I was not alone. I gripped my bear spray and picked up my pace and tried not to panic. I made it to a small clearing, and for some reason I stopped. I turned my head slightly, and that's when I saw it. About 40 yards back behind me and standing next to a tree was a mountain lion. It stood completely still as if it was mimicking me and had its eyes locked on me. At this point, it felt like time froze, and every second we stared at each other felt like an hour. That's when I stayed facing it and started walking backwards. I was taught from a young age that you never want to turn your back on a wild animal. So as I backed away and kept my eyes on the mountain lion, I started yelling and trying to act bigger than I was. But it just kept slowly walking toward me like it wasn't even fazed. I didn't want to resort to using my bear spray, but I readied it and took the safety off. Then the mountain lion was about 15 yards from me and didn't seem like it was going to back off. So I fired a burst of spray. It stopped and shook its head and gave me one last look and then darted away into the trees. I didn't wait. I just continued to walk backwards for another 5 minutes and then turned and ran. I know you're not supposed to run, but something took over and I just ran. I ran until I saw the parking lot, and when I got back, I reported the incident to the ranger station, and they said mountain lions rarely attack, but are very curious animals, and when you're alone, you're more likely to be followed. They said a lot of times hikers don't even know they're being followed. That's why they're called the silent stalkers. I got lucky that day and learned a hard lesson, but I'll probably still hike alone, but be more prepared. I'm just glad it wasn't a grizzly bear. Last October, I went hiking alone along the Appalachian Trail through a lesser-known stretch near the North Carolina-Tennessee border, an area known by locals as Dead Man's Pass. I never heard of it, which should have been the first red flag. I arrived at the trailhead around 2 p.m., just planning to do a short overnight. I packed light, just a tent, food, headlamp, and a knife. I read online about a beautiful overlook called Devil's Ridge just a few miles in, but unfortunately I had no cell service. The first couple of hours were peaceful, and the hike was beautiful. The sun was shining, but then around dusk, that's when the fog rolled in. Fast, like it was being poured in through a crack in the sky. It blanketed everything so thick I couldn't see 5 feet ahead, and that's when I heard something. I heard what sounded like a whistle, a low, steady, deliberate whistle. I could tell it wasn't a bird or the wind. It repeated very, very similar patterns. That's when I stopped walking, my heart already pounding. I listened harder. There were no insects, no rustling of animals, just fog and that whistle. Then it stopped, and something moved. Not beside me, not behind me, but ahead, just out of the view. A shadow in the fog. It looked human, tall, maybe 6 foot or more. I could barely make it out, but it wasn't moving naturally. Its arms hung too long, too loose, and it just stared. I couldn't see its face, only that it was darker than the mist, standing like it was waiting for me. I took a step back, and another, but when I turned, I saw another one. Same height, same unnatural stillness, just standing in the fog behind me. I don't remember deciding to run, I just did. I sprinted off the trail, not even thinking. Branches tore at my arms. I didn't even know where I was going, but every time I turned, I saw more of them. Tall black figures in the trees, watching, never moving, never chasing, just appearing. I finally stopped after what felt like forever. My legs burned, and my throat was raw from breathing so hard. Somehow I found a clearing, just a small patch of land where the fog had thinned out a bit. I set up camp right there. I didn't care if it was off the trail. But that night, I didn't sleep. And this is where things got really creepy. They never came into the clearing, but I saw them all night, just standing there inside the tree line, at least 6 of them, maybe more. No sound, no movement, just watching. When I pointed my flashlight at them, they'd vanish, but once the light moved, they'd reappear. By dawn, they were gone. I packed up fast and used my compass to try and head back toward the trail. It took me hours, but eventually I saw the trail marker. Then my car. I didn't look back once, and I never returned. Once I got back to town to get gas, I did ask the locals about it. One old man at the gas station gave me a strange look when I mentioned Devil's Ridge. He said something like, "They've been there long before us. Don't whistle back, and don't stay when the fog comes." I hadn't whistled, but I had stayed. Some say the Appalachian Mountains are older than bones, older than memory. There are things in those woods that don't want to be seen, And worse, there's ones that do. It was supposed to be a simple weekend hike. Me and my friend Kyle set out early Saturday morning to tackle the Black Balsam Knob Loop, just over 10 miles, with gorgeous views of the Blue Ridge Mountains and a forecast that at the time looked mostly clear. We'd done plenty of hikes together, so we weren't too worried. We packed light, just rain jackets, trail snacks, headlamps, and a two-man tent, just the essentials. The first few miles were perfect. Cool breeze, open skies, the scent of pine trees. We were climbing to one of the most exposed ridge lines when Kyle stopped and looked back. He asked me, "Did you hear that?" At first I didn't, then low thunder, rumbling somewhere off in the distance. I checked my phone, no signal of course, but the sky looked mostly okay, a little gray to the west, but nothing serious. We figured we had time to reach the campsite up ahead and set up before any rain hit. We were wrong. By the time we got halfway across the ridge, the temperature dropped fast. The wind kicked up, trees down in the valley started swaying violently, like something was shaking the whole forest. The storm rolled in like it had been waiting just out of sight, and then came the lightning. Huge bolts, cracking, just seconds after the thunder. We were in a horrible spot, fully exposed, no real cover. There were no boulders, no overhangs, no trees tall enough to feel safe under, just bald mountaintop and us hunched and panicking. Then the rain came, all at once. Sheets of it. I could barely see. My jacket might as well have been paper. Everything was soaked in seconds, gear, socks, even the inside of my pack. The trail disappeared in front of us like it had never been there. We tried to keep moving, but then came the close one. A flash of white light, a crack, and then a boom, simultaneously. The air buzzed, and I swear I felt the ground jump beneath me. My ears rang. I turned and saw Kyle on the ground, curled into a ball. "Are you hit?" I yelled. He shook his head dazed. It was right there. We scrambled downhill, trying to get off the ridge. The mud made it almost impossible. I slipped hard, my hands skidding over roots and wet rock. The thunder never stopped, just rolled and echoed, like the mountains were groaning all around us. Finally, we found a patch of lower forest and ducked beneath a dense thicket of rhododendron. It wasn't shelter, not really, but it was better than nothing. We crouched there, soaked to the bone, shivering. We had to stay in this spot for a whole nother hour until the storm finally passed. Then we made it back up the ridge and finally made it to camp. I think the next time we go hiking we're going to check the weather a little bit more thoroughly than this time. I hiked a solo section of the Appalachian Trail in Virginia in the fall of 2021. I'd done dozens of solo hikes before, but nothing over 3 days. I picked this stretch because it was known to be quiet, remote, but well marked with decent campsites and enough water sources to avoid carrying too much. The first day was uneventful, peaceful even. I passed maybe 1 or 2 people all morning, then didn't see another soul until dusk. I camped off trail near a stream and fell asleep to the sound of owls and water. The second day was when things got strange. Mid-morning, maybe around 9:30 a.m., I spotted a man ahead of me on the trail. He was standing still, not walking, just facing away. He wore a dark green jacket and a black beanie. Nothing weird at first, but something about how still he was bothered me. I said, "Morning," when I got close enough. No response. I slowed down, ready to pass him, but the second I stepped to the side, he walked forward. No glance, no nod, nothing. Just started hiking ahead of me, same pace. I hung back thinking he probably didn't want company, no big deal, but then I saw him again a few hours later. Same jacket, same beanie, same stillness. Just standing off to the right of the trail this time, staring into the woods. I froze. How did he get ahead of me? I never saw him pass, and I hadn't stopped longer than 5 minutes since our first encounter. I walked slowly past him, didn't say anything this time. He didn't move. By sunset, I reached a designated campsite near an old stone fire ring. I didn't see him again that evening, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Something just felt off. I kept checking over my shoulder. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. The woods were dead silent, unnaturally silent. Not even crickets. I sat up in my tent, heart pounding, and heard it. A single footstep, heavy just outside. Then nothing. I didn't move. I didn't unzip the tent. I just sat there, holding my knife until the sun rose. The next morning, I found a boot print in the dirt just a few feet from my tent flap. One print deep, like someone had stood there perfectly still for a long time. I practically ran the final leg of the trail that day, never looked back. When I got home, I mentioned it in a hiking forum. One guy messaged me privately and said something I still think about. There's a story about a guy who went missing out there in the 90s, wore a green army jacket and a black beanie. People say they still see him, always just standing, and never speaks. I don't know what I saw out there, but I'll never hike that stretch of trail again. In the summer of 2022, I took a week-long solo backpacking trip through the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness in Montana. It borders Yellowstone, so grizzlies are a real concern, but I did everything right. Bear spray, canister making noise. I wasn't new to this. I've hiked in bear country before. The third night, I camped off trail near a high alpine lake. The sky was clear, stars insane. Everything was quiet in that eerie, still way the backcountry gets after dark. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a low, rhythmic huffing sound. It was deep, heavy. My first thought was an elk, but when I sat up and unzipped my tent, I saw the outline of a massive figure moving just past a tree line, way too big for an elk. It was maybe 30 yards away, sniffing the air, lumbering back and forth. Even from that distance, I could see its size. It was a grizzly, easily over 600 pounds. I didn't move, I didn't breathe, I just watched. It circled the campsite slowly, never coming closer than maybe 20 feet, but close enough I could hear its breathing, hear sticks snapping under its weight. I clutched the bear spray with both hands, but I knew that if it charged, the tent wasn't going to save me. And then it left, or so I thought. I sat there frozen for maybe 15 more minutes. Nothing. I finally convinced myself it had wandered off and laid back down. I must have drifted off because the next time I opened my eyes, the tent was dark again, but something was pressing against the side of it. Not pawing, not tearing, just leaning. The nylon sagged inward like someone was pushing their full body weight against it. I could smell it, the mix of wet dog, rot, and musk. I didn't even have the courage to unzip the tent. I just waited. The pressure lasted maybe 20 seconds, then slowly it lifted. This time I heard it walk away, each footstep a deliberate crunch in the gravel and pine needles. I waited until the sun started rising before I moved. When I finally stepped outside, my bear canister had been rolled 50 feet down the hill. My pack was untouched, but the ground around my tent was covered in prints. Deep, wide tracks. It had walked around the tent 6 times. And right where I felt the pressure, there was a streak of fur and dried saliva on the tent wall. I packed up and hiked 14 miles out that day, non-stop. I didn't eat, didn't rest. I've never gone back to that part of the wilderness since. I later talked to a ranger who said grizzlies sometimes test things by leaning on them to see if they move, to see if they're alive. He told me I was lucky, but I think I was something else. I think I was being watched. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate it and thank you. And next time you're out in the wilderness or hiking alone, remember, you're never alone.